What if everything you believed about your family was a lie? Not just a small lie, but one so devastating it tore lives apart. Imagine uncovering a secret so deeply hidden, so profoundly shocking, that it forever changed how you saw the people you loved the most. This is the story of Ryan Matthews, a Florida police officer whose discovery of a dark family secret led to an unthinkable tragedy. A tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and heartbreak that left a family shattered and a community in shock. Stay with us as we unravel the events that led to this devastating moment. A fateful discovery that turned what seemed like an ordinary family into the center of a harrowing crime scene. You won't believe how it all unfolded. This story takes us to Clearwater, Florida, a city famous for its serene coastal views, golden sunsets, and the calm rhythm of suburban life. It's a place where families gather for barbecues, neighbors wave as they pass each other on quiet streets, and the sound of children playing echoes through tree-lined parks. On the surface, Clearwater seems like a slice of paradise. But for one family, the Matthews, that picturesque facade, it hid a secret so dark it would shatter their world. At the heart of this story is Ryan Matthews, a man known for his calm demeanor and unwavering dedication to justice. In his mid-30s, Ryan had worked tirelessly as a police officer, building a reputation for fairness and reliability. He was the kind of person the community looked up to, someone who embodied integrity in both his personal and professional life. Ryan came from a family that seemed close-knit and full of love. His father, Tom Matthews, a retired school principal, was a man of principle who had spent decades guiding young minds and leading by example. His presence in Ryan's life had been a steady anchor, a source of wisdom and pride. Then there was Linda Matthews, Ryan's mother, a homemaker whose warmth filled the family home. Linda was known for her gentle smile and her ability to make everyone feel at ease. Her devotion to her family was evident in every detail, from the meals she cooked to the traditions she upheld. And finally, there was Eric Matthews, Tom's younger brother. Eric was the quiet one in the family, a man who often stood in the background during family gatherings. Unlike Tom's larger-than-life persona or Linda's welcoming presence, Eric kept to himself, rarely drawing attention. He was polite and reserved, and though he was always around, he seemed to fade into the periphery of the Matthews' vibrant family life. To the outside world, the Matthews family seemed like the epitome of stability. They had their challenges, of course every family does, but nothing that would hint at the storm brewing beneath the surface. Yet behind the laughter at family dinners and the holiday traditions they cherished, there was a secret that none of them dared to confront, a secret that would eventually come to light and leave devastation in its wake. What makes this story so unsettling is that it didn't start with crime or violence. It began with curiosity, an ordinary decision that led to an extraordinary revelation. Ryan, like so many others, decided to explore his roots through a simple DNA test, hoping to learn more about his family's history. But the answers he found would lead him down a path he could never have anticipated, a path that would test his love, his loyalty, and his very sense of self. This is not just the story of a family torn apart by betrayal. It is a story of identity, of how the truths we uncover about our past can reshape everything we thought we knew. For Ryan Matthews, those truths would push him to the edge, setting the stage for a tragedy that Clearwater, Florida, would never forget. Ryan Matthews grew up in what seemed like an idyllic family. His father, Tom Matthews, was the embodiment of strength and reliability, a retired school principal who carried himself with a quiet authority. To Ryan, Tom was more than just a parent. He was a mentor, a role model, and the man whose approval meant everything. The bond between father and son was deep, built on years of shared experiences like fishing trips, lessons on life, and long talks on their front porch in Clearwater, Florida. Ryan's mother, Linda Matthews, was equally devoted. She created a nurturing environment, one where laughter was common and traditions were cherished. Family meals were sacred, birthdays were always celebrated with enthusiasm, and there was a sense of closeness that many envied. To Ryan, the Matthews family was a rock, a foundation that had always felt unshakable. But life has a way of revealing cracks where you least expect them. For Ryan, it began on an ordinary day at the police precinct. Over coffee, a group of his colleagues was chatting about ancestry DNA tests. One officer joked about discovering a distant relative who was a famous athlete, while another shared a story about uncovering a family branch no one knew existed. The conversation was light-hearted, filled with laughter and curiosity, but it planted a seed in Ryan's mind. Growing up, Ryan had often heard his grandmother share stories about their family's ancestry. She spoke with pride about their West African roots and a trace of Native American heritage. The tales were fascinating, but they were just that, stories. Ryan had never thought to verify them, but now, listening to his colleagues, he wondered what his own DNA might reveal. It wasn't just about curiosity, it was about understanding where he came from and connecting to his family's history on a deeper level. With a mix of excitement and intrigue, Ryan decided to order a DNA test kit. It felt like a harmless endeavor, something fun to do in his spare time. He followed the instructions carefully, spitting into the tube, sealing it, and mailing it off. As he dropped the package into the mailbox, he felt a quiet anticipation. He imagined the results confirming everything he'd been told, perhaps even uncovering a few interesting surprises. Little did he know those results would not only surprise him, they would upend his entire world. Weeks passed, and the DNA results arrived early one morning. Ryan sat at his kitchen table, the screen of his phone glowing as he logged into the testing company's app. The first section was exactly what he expected. West African ancestry made up the majority of his genetic makeup, with a small trace of Native American heritage. He smiled, satisfied that the family stories had been accurate. But then, his eyes moved to the section labeled paternal line. Something wasn't right. According to the results, his paternal DNA matched the Matthews family lineage. The app's data was clear and unyielding. Tom Matthews, the man who had raised him, was not his biological father. Ryan's first reaction was disbelief. Surely there had been a mistake. He refreshed the app, double-checked the data, and even considered reaching out to the DNA testing company for clarification. But every time he looked, the results were the same. His heart raced as confusion gave way to a gnawing sense of betrayal. If Tom wasn't his biological father, then who was? And why had no one ever told him? The questions consumed him. Memories of his childhood flooded back, the way Tom had always been there for him, teaching him right from wrong, supporting his dreams, and celebrating his achievements. If those moments weren't built on biological ties, what were they built on? Ryan felt as though his identity, the foundation of who he was, had been called into question. Desperate for answers, Ryan turned to the one person he thought could explain everything, his mother, Linda. When he confronted her, his voice was steady but laced with frustration. "Mom, I need to know the truth," he said. "Why does my DNA say Dad isn't my father?" Linda froze. Her face paled and her hands trembled as she set down the dish she had been holding. She hesitated, as if searching for the right words, but Ryan pressed on. "Who is my real father?" he demanded, his voice rising. Finally, Linda took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with tears. What she revealed was a secret she had carried for decades, a truth she had hoped would never come to light. "It's Eric," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan stared at her, uncomprehending. "Eric? Uncle Eric?" Linda nodded, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her confession. She explained that long before Ryan was born, she and Eric had been involved in a romantic relationship. They had been young and deeply in love, but circumstances had pulled them apart. When they reconnected years later, Linda was already married to Tom. Despite her vows, her feelings for Eric had never faded, and their relationship had continued in secret. Ryan listened in stunned silence as Linda recounted the affair. She spoke of guilt, fear, and the decision to bury the truth for the sake of her marriage and her family. She had convinced herself that it was better this way, that Ryan didn't need to know. "I never wanted to hurt you," Linda said, her voice cracking. "I thought I was protecting you." But Ryan didn't feel protected. He felt betrayed. The foundation of his life, the love, the trust, the sense of belonging had been built on a lie. And now that lie had unraveled, leaving him to grapple with the weight of a truth he never asked for. The revelation set the stage for a chain of events that would spiral out of control, culminating in a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. What began as a simple DNA test had become the catalyst for a devastating reckoning, one that would tear the Matthews family apart forever. The truth often has a way of surfacing when it's least expected. For Ryan Matthews, the revelation came in a way he never could have anticipated. Delivered not in whispers but in blunt, undeniable clarity. The DNA test he had taken out of curiosity had become a ticking time bomb, and when it exploded, it unearthed secrets that had been buried for over 3 decades. When Ryan confronted his mother, Linda, he expected her to deny it, to tell him it was all a mistake. Instead, she froze, her composure cracking under the weight of his questions. The strong, nurturing woman who had always seemed unshakable now stood trembling, her face pale, her eyes darting as though she could find an escape from the moment. "Mom," Ryan said again, his voice rising, "who is my real father?" The silence stretched unbearably until Linda finally sank into a chair at the kitchen table. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she began to speak. "It's Eric," she said. "Your Uncle Eric." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Ryan blinked, unable to process what he had just heard. His uncle, Eric Matthews. The quiet, reserved man who had always lingered in the background during family gatherings was his biological father. Linda took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. She began to explain, her voice cracking as she recounted a chapter of her life she had kept hidden for so long. Years before Ryan was born, Linda was a college student, full of dreams and ambition. It was during that time that she met Eric, Tom's younger brother. Eric was charming, intelligent, and passionate. Unlike Tom, who was steady and practical, Eric was adventurous and unpredictable. He made Linda laugh in ways no one else could. Their connection was instant, intense, and undeniable. It wasn't just a fling, Linda admitted, her voice trembling. We were in love. Deeply in love. Their relationship blossomed, but as often happens in life, circumstances pulled them apart. Eric's plans took him to another state, while Linda remained in Clearwater. Heartbroken but determined to move forward, Linda eventually met Tom, a man who offered her stability and security. Tom was everything Eric wasn't. Steady, reliable, and deeply committed. Linda convinced herself that what she had shared with Eric was a chapter of her past, one that didn't need to define her future. She and Tom married, and for a while life seemed perfect. But then Eric reappeared. A car accident had left him hospitalized for months, and by the time he recovered, he had returned to Clearwater to be closer to family. When Linda saw him again, all the emotions she had buried came rushing back. At first, their interactions were guarded. They avoided being alone together, knowing the risk of reknitting old feelings. But the pull between them was undeniable. They began to meet in secret, initially just to talk, but the line between past and present quickly blurred. Their stolen moments became more frequent, and soon they were in the throes of an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen, Linda said, her voice breaking. I loved Tom, but with Eric, it was different. It was something I couldn't control. Months later, Linda discovered she was pregnant. She was overcome with fear and guilt. She chose not to tell either man the truth. She told Tom he was the father, and Eric, perhaps suspecting but never confirming, stayed silent. Linda hoped the secret would remain buried, that the family she had built with Tom would stay intact. For over 30 years she had carried that secret, and for over 30 years the lie had remained hidden until now. For Ryan, the revelation was like a gut punch. The father he had idolized, the man who had guided him through life, was not his biological father. The mother he trusted had lied to him his entire life. And Eric, the quiet, unassuming uncle who had always kept his distance, was the man at the center of it all. Ryan's mind raced with memories of Eric. He thought about the way Eric had always seemed detached, never fully engaging with the family. Was it guilt? Was it his way of protecting himself? Or was it something more? The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but with each piece, Ryan felt his world crumbling. The betrayal wasn't just about biology. It was about trust. It was about the foundation of his identity being built on lies. Ryan couldn't understand how his mother could keep such a secret, how she could look him in the eye every day knowing the truth. He thought of his father, Tom, a man who had loved and supported him unconditionally. Did Tom know? Had he suspected? Or was he just another victim of Linda's deception? And Eric? How could his own uncle stay silent all these years? Did he ever think about stepping forward, about claiming Ryan as his son? Or was he content to live in the shadows, pretending everything was normal? As these questions swirled in Ryan's mind, the anger inside him grew. The discovery wasn't just a revelation. It was a bombshell that obliterated everything he thought he knew about himself and his family. The relationships he had held sacred now felt tainted, and the trust he had placed in the people closest to him had been shattered. For Ryan, the truth wasn't just painful, it was devastating. And as he stood there in the kitchen, staring at his mother's tear-streaked face, he realized there was no way to undo what had been done. The secret was out, and the Matthews family would never be the same. The truth, once revealed, has a way of ripping through lives like a storm. For Ryan Matthews, the revelation of his true parentage wasn't just a shock. It was an earthquake that shattered the very foundation of his identity. The DNA test had uncovered a secret so deep buried that even Ryan, a man trained to uncover the truth as a police officer, could not have anticipated its magnitude. His mother, Linda, had confessed to a decades-old affair with Eric, her husband's younger brother. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was the dismantling of an entire family narrative, one Ryan had relied on his entire life. The confrontation began in the quiet of the Matthews family kitchen. Ryan's voice, sharp with anger and disbelief, cut through the air like a knife. Linda tried to explain, but her words only deepened the wound. The man Ryan had called his father, Tom Matthews, wasn't his biological parent. Instead, it was Eric, the reserved and distant uncle who had always seemed like a shadow in the family dynamic. As the days passed, the tension in the Matthews household reached a boiling point. Ryan demanded answers not just from Linda but also from Eric. He wanted to know why the truth had been hidden for so long, why neither of them had the courage to come forward. Eric's responses were evasive, his guilt evident but his words hollow. Each conversation escalated, leaving Ryan more enraged and confused. Linda, desperate to bring some semblance of order to the chaos, decided to call a family meeting. She hoped that getting everyone together, Ryan, Tom, Eric, and Eric's wife, might provide an opportunity for clarity and, perhaps, a path toward healing. But what unfolded that evening was anything but healing. The dinner began in uneasy silence. Linda had set the table with her best china, as if formality could somehow mask the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Tom, unaware of the storm about to descend, chatted casually about his day. Eric sat quietly, his wife by his side, her face etched with confusion and concern. Ryan, on the other hand, was a tightly wound spring, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on Linda. Finally, Linda cleared her throat. "There's something we need to talk about," she began, her voice trembling. Ryan couldn't hold back. Slamming his fork down on the table, he shouted, "Why don't you tell him, Mom? Tell Dad who my real father is." Tom froze, his face a mixture of confusion and alarm. "What is he talking about, Linda?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Linda's hands trembled as she tried to find the words. "Tom," she said, tears streaming down her face, "I never wanted you to find out this way, but Ryan isn't your biological son." The room erupted into chaos. Tom stared at Linda in disbelief, his voice breaking as he shouted, "What do you mean? What are you saying?" Ryan pointed to Eric, his voice dripping with contempt. "She's saying that he's my father. Eric, your brother." The weight of the revelation hit Tom like a physical blow. His breathing grew labored, his chest heaving as he clutched the edge of the table for support. "Is this true?" he asked, turning to Eric, his voice barely above a whisper. Eric's silence spoke volumes. He couldn't meet Tom's gaze, and the guilt etched on his face was answer enough. Tom's hand went to his chest, his face contorting in pain. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Moments later, he collapsed to the floor. Linda screamed, rushing to his side, but it was too late. Tom Matthews, the man who had raised Ryan with love and devotion, was gone. His heart, already weakened by age, had given out under the weight of betrayal and heartbreak. The room descended into chaos. Linda sobbed uncontrollably, cradling Tom's lifeless body. Eric stood frozen, his face pale, while his wife gasped in horror. Ryan, consumed by a mix of grief and fury, stared at the scene before him, his mind racing. In that moment, something inside Ryan snapped. The weight of the betrayal, the loss of the man he had always believed to be his father, and the lies that had unraveled his life were too much to bear. He stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy, and returned moments later with his service weapon in hand. "Ryan, no," Linda cried, her voice breaking as she saw the gun. But Ryan was beyond reason. His hands trembled as he pointed the weapon at Linda. "You lied to me," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "You destroyed everything." "Ryan, please," Linda pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect you." But her words fell on deaf ears. In a moment of uncontrollable anger, Ryan pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the room and Linda collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath her. Her sobs were silenced, her life extinguished in an instant. Eric stepped forward, his hands raised in surrender. "Ryan, stop. This isn't the way." But Ryan turned the gun on him, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and fury. "You took my family from me," he said, his voice hollow. Without hesitation, he fired again. Eric fell beside Linda, his body lifeless, as his wife screamed in terror. The room was eerily silent now, the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder and the weight of what had just transpired. Ryan stood amidst the devastation, the gun slipping from his hand and clattering to the floor. His breathing was shallow, his face expressionless, as if the enormity of his actions hadn't yet registered. When the police arrived, they found Ryan sitting in the living room, his head in his hands. He offered no resistance as they placed him in handcuffs. The man who had once been a pillar of the community was now the perpetrator of a crime that had left his family in ruins. What began as a simple curiosity about his ancestry had spiraled into a nightmare of betrayal, heartbreak, and violence. The Matthews family, once the picture of stability, was now the center of a tragedy that Clearwater, Florida, would never forget. The night of the crime, Clearwater police arrived at the Matthews family home to a scene that none of them could have imagined. A once happy household was now a crime scene filled with devastation. Officers found Ryan Matthews sitting on the living room couch, his head in his hands, surrounded by the bodies of his mother Linda and his uncle Eric. His service weapon lay discarded on the floor, a haunting reminder of the violence that had unfolded just moments before. Ryan didn't resist arrest. When officers approached him, he simply looked up with hollow eyes and said, "I did it. They ruined everything." His words, devoid of emotion, sent a chill through the officers as they placed him in handcuffs and led him to the waiting patrol car. The man they knew as a dedicated and level-headed colleague was now at the center of a horrific crime, his reputation as a respected officer forever shattered. News of the tragedy spread quickly through Clearwater. In a community where the Matthews family was well known, the details of the crime left everyone in shock. People struggled to reconcile the Ryan they thought they knew, a reliable, even-tempered police officer, with the man who had committed such a violent act. The Matthews story, which once seemed so perfect, was now the subject of whispered conversations and front-page headlines. In the days following the crime, the community wrestled with a mix of emotions: disbelief, anger, and sorrow. Some blamed Ryan entirely, calling him a cold-blooded murderer who had let his anger consume him. Others sympathized with him, arguing that the betrayal he faced would have broken anyone. The revelations about Linda's affair and Eric's role in Ryan's paternity added another layer of complexity, leaving many to question how such secrets could remain hidden for so long. The media quickly latched onto the story, turning Ryan's trial into a nationwide spectacle. Headlines dubbed it "The Matthews Family Tragedy," and news outlets dissected every detail, from Linda and Eric's decades-long secret to the emotional turmoil that had driven Ryan to commit such a brutal act. The courtroom was packed during the trial, with reporters, family, friends, and curious onlookers filling every seat. Ryan sat silently through most of the proceedings, his once proud posture now slouched with the weight of his actions. His defense team argued that he had acted in a moment of uncontrollable rage, driven by the betrayal of learning that his entire life had been built on a lie. They painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by grief, guilt, and anger, a man whose mind had been clouded by emotions he didn't know how to process. The prosecution, however, was unrelenting. They emphasized Ryan's training as a police officer, arguing that someone with his background should have known how to control his emotions, even in the face of personal devastation. They described his actions as calculated, pointing to the fact that he had retrieved his weapon and made the conscious decision to pull the trigger, not once but twice. The evidence was clear, and the prosecution left little room for doubt. Witnesses were called to testify, including Eric's widow, who tearfully recounted the events of that night. Her testimony was raw and emotional, painting a vivid picture of the chaos that unfolded during the family dinner. She spoke of Tom's sudden collapse, Linda's desperate pleas for Ryan to put down the gun, and the horrifying sound of gunshots that ended 2 lives in an instant. Her words left the courtroom in stunned silence, a poignant reminder of the human cost of that night's tragedy. When the verdict was read, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. Ryan was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's words were firm but measured as he delivered the sentence, emphasizing the gravity of Ryan's actions while acknowledging the pain and betrayal that had preceded them. Ryan showed little reaction as he was led out of the courtroom, his fate sealed. For the Matthews family, the scars left behind were deeper than any courtroom verdict could address. Tom Matthews, the man who had loved and raised Ryan as his own, was gone, his life cut short by the stress of the revelations. Linda and Eric, whose choices had set the tragedy in motion, were also gone, leaving behind unanswered questions and shattered relationships. Eric's widow, now grappling with the loss of her husband and the betrayal of his actions, faced an uncertain future. And Ryan, once the pride of his community, was now a man whose life had been irreparably changed by a single, fateful night. This case raises profound and uncomfortable questions about the impact of family secrets and the consequences of hiding the truth. How much damage can a lie cause when it's allowed to fester for decades? Could this tragedy have been avoided if Linda had come forward with the truth earlier, sparing Ryan the shock of learning it in such a devastating way? Or would the truth, no matter when it was revealed, have always led to pain and destruction? It also sheds light on the emotional toll of betrayal and the ways in which unresolved trauma can push someone to their breaking point. Ryan's actions were undeniably wrong, but they were also a reflection of a man pushed to the edge by grief, anger, and a sense of profound loss. The case forces us to ask, where does accountability end and understanding begin? Was Ryan's rage solely driven by the betrayal, or was it compounded by years of pressure, expectations, and the sudden collapse of the world he thought he knew? Beyond the personal implications, the Matthews family tragedy also serves as a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of modern technology. DNA testing has become a popular tool for exploring family history, but as this case demonstrates, it can also uncover truths that people may not be prepared to face. For many, these tests bring closure and connection, but for others they reveal secrets that have the power to unravel lives. What do you think about this case? Were Ryan's actions purely the result of betrayal, or was there more to his story? And could this tragedy have been avoided if the truth had come out sooner? And what does this story say about the weight of secrets and the responsibility we have to face the past, no matter how painful it may be? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Was justice served, or did the complexity of this tragedy make true justice impossible? If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who loves exploring the unexpected twists of true crime. And if you want more in-depth stories that challenge how we see family, love, and betrayal, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay curious and stay safe.